Shabbat Shalom, and good to have all those who are joining us online. We're back live in Bushy. We feel now as the weeks are beginning slowly to get a little bit, the Shabbatot getting a little bit later, a chance for us once again to be able to sing live with you, to share live with you. I'm sure that we've enjoyed the geographical hopping that we've done, going to various different shuls. But as Dorothy once said to me, there is no place like home, and it is nice to be back where we belong. The Rimshutzer Rebbe talks about sometimes the times of the year inspire the Sedra. In other words, we look through the Torah differently than we do otherwise because of what's happening around us, the times that we're in. And sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes instead of us seeing the world through the lens of the Torah, instead the Torah inspires how we should see the world. And this Shabbat is unique. It's called Shabbat Shira. Shabbat Shira specifically means the Shabbat of song. It's the Shabbat in which we have the singing of Beshalach. If we were in Shul, we'd all would be upstanding for the Az Yashir, for the Shira last night. I don't know if all of you have had the chance to hear my father-in-law sing. He has the most beautiful voice. He takes after me, but that's a different conversation. His bar mitzvah was on Beshalach. And from the time of his bar mitzvah, he's never missed a year of singing the Shira. However, he knew this year would be different. And therefore on Zoom last night, we had a rendition of the Shira, of the song from him. It was absolutely phenomenal and absolutely wonderful. And the Rimshutzer tries to tell us, this great Rebbe tries to say, that perhaps the Torah portion is supposed to inspire us to song this particular Shabbat. If we find ourselves around the Shabbat table, particularly moved to sing, on our Shabbat walk, whether it's snowing or otherwise, and we find ourselves humming along to something, perhaps it's because we're in tuned to the Torah portion. Song, as we know, brings us to a moment of recognition and clarity, of being exalted to the point where we spontaneously burst forth with song. And perhaps even if it doesn't take a melodious particular tone, but rather it's simply that we are gifted to have particular clarity in something which is challenging us. And it comes through the Shabbat. That alone itself would be worthwhile, would be meaningful, would be what makes it Shabbat Shira. I remember many years ago, when I was in yeshiva, we would have songs sung on Friday night. Friday night was the time of singing. We call this Oneg Shabbat. It hasn't really taken off in Bushy the way that I would love it to have taken off. But if you could just imagine the scene, you finish your Friday night meal, there's a long Friday evening of winter ahead, and you gather together in people's homes, and you sing, and you drink, and you sing, and you schmooze, and you're together. That's what Oneg Shabbat means. Obviously, Oneg means to enjoy. It's the delight of Shabbat. And we used to do that on Friday nights in our yeshiva. We would finish our meal, we would learn some Torah, then come downstairs into our cheder ochel, into the dining room, and sing together, nibble together, and just have a good time. And the Rabbanim from the local area, the local community would come down as well. I remember once finding myself, as I was already what we call an alter bacher, I was one of the older ones in the yeshiva already. I was the grand total of 20 years old. I mean, I was ancient by comparison to some of the younger students. So I was at the top table near where the rabbis were, because, you know, as you get more prestige, they move you higher and higher up the ranks. That probably explains why I'm in the front of the shul. Doesn't explain why some of the people who are on this call are all the way in the back of the shul. That's a very different conversation that we don't have to get into. You know who I'm looking at right now. Anyway, that's not the point right now. That's right. Okay. But because I was right there next to my Rabbanim, I got a chance to watch them and to interact with them in ways that someone else couldn't. And most of the Rabbanim, they were singing, they were enjoying themselves. Oh, Oneg Shabbos, how could you not sing? But Rabbi Avram Haller, who was one of the rabbis in the yeshiva, and he happened to be sitting right next to me. And rather than him actually singing, instead he seemed to be, I'm only going to say in the vernacular, he was spacing out. He had that vacuous, empty glaze in his eyes. He was, kind of unconsciously nibbling on popcorn. His mind was somewhere else. Back then, I perhaps had even less control over what came out of my mouth as I do today. And therefore, although it probably wasn't the most appropriate thing to say, I turned to my rabbi and said, Rabbi Howler, are you bored? He looks up at me, tunes back in, and gives me one of his Rabbi Howler piercing glares, and he says, Elchi, he called me Elchi, he said, Elchi, bored. How could you be bored? He says about himself, if I was ever bored, I would think, Avraham, why are you bored? And then I think about what it means to be bored. There's never time to be bored. There's always something going on. He said, boredom? There's no room for boredom in life. And with that, he stands up to give his address that he had been preparing in his mind. Whilst everyone was singing, it was his turn to speak. And therefore, he was using the opportunity to get his thoughts together. He wasn't spacing out. He was focusing on what he was about to recite for us. I had no idea he was going to speak. I just thought he was somewhere else. But rather, he was very, very focused. And certainly boredom was not anywhere in the picture for him. Now, I bring this up because boredom is normally, if I'm bored, like kids say they're bored all the time. What does it mean to be bored? Does being bored simply mean that I am demotivated? Absolutely not. Boredom's not the same thing as not having motivation. Not having motivation means that you're struggling, that you're having difficulty moving yourself from one place to another. Fed up is not the same thing as being bored as well, where you are motivated, you're just not motivated to be doing the thing that you're doing. Boredom is actually our mind's way of telling us that what's going on right now needs to shift. Boredom is our way of trying to switch gears, psychologically speaking, and saying, the brain telling us, come on, let's go and move from what we're doing into something more active, something which is more meaningful. And the Bnei Yisrael specifically were challenged with the concept of boredom when it came to this week's portion in which we've left Mitzrayim. We're no longer working. We've gone through the splitting of the sea, and we've come out the other side, and manna from heaven is now falling. And suddenly, for the first time in living history, and more than that, our people have time on their hands. Our people find themselves in a circumstance where they're bored. And therefore, the pasuk says as follows: Vayomer Hashem Moshe, Hashem said to Moshe, Hini mamtu lechem lechem el hashamayim, behold, I will rain down bread from the heavens. V'yotza ha'am v'loktu dvar yom b'yom, and the people will go in and gather that man every day, laman anasenu, in order to test them. Hayilach b'torasiyim lo, will they follow my instruction, my Torah, or not? It seems that boredom, having to choose what to do when you find yourself with time in your hands, when you find yourselves in Groundhog Day, where every day seems to roll into the next. And this was a test for our people to decide, what will we do with our newfound space, with our newfound pause, with our newfound time? Would they use it profitably? Would they spend more time focused on self-development and Torah study? Would they use as opportunities to call out and to support those who are in need? Or would they instead try to kill it? One of my worst expressions, to kill time and to chew it up with something which is less profitable. And that was a test at that time for our people, but perhaps we can suggest it's equally a test today. Normally, certainly those who are in their working career find themselves very busy. Shabbos comes in and you're exhausted. Our children, whether they're in primary school, secondary school, university, or whatever it might be, are very, very busy throughout the week. Extracurricular activities, so much going on. Not so now. Now, we find for many people that we have more than too much time on our hands. And we need to think to ourselves, how will we use that time profitably? How will we use it in a motivating and meaningful fashion? Or we allow ourselves to just be bored, or perhaps to not utilize our time as meaningfully as we can. The test of boredom, the trial of being in a circumstance when we have to choose how we'll use our time. Not such an easy thing to do always, but perhaps one of the most positive and inspirational things that have come from this COVID circumstance is that there's more accessible and more opportunities, perhaps in a virtual plane or otherwise, in order that we can involve ourselves with, that we can have a flourishing and nourishing experience from, and perhaps giving all of us a good choice of what to do when boredom hits. A little bit of a thought for the week and something to consider as we go into Shabbat.